All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going to tackle a topic that, let's be honest, can sometimes feel like a total chore, but it's actually right at the heart of doing ministry well, and that's documentation. We're going to explore how note-taking isn't just about paperwork, it's a core practice of faithful, loving, biblical counseling.
So, right off the bat, here's the question we have to ask ourselves. Is writing up session notes just another bureaucratic box we have to check, or could we maybe see it as a spiritual discipline? Seriously, how you answer that question changes everything about how you approach this work.
And this right here, this is the big idea, the foundation for everything we're about to talk about. See, documentation isn't some separate administrative task. No, it's a ministry of stewardship. It's taking care of what's been entrusted to you. When you really get that, you see that to document well is actually to love well.
Okay, so what does this look like in the real world? Why does it matter so much? Well, for one, good notes protect everyone. They protect the counselee by making sure their story is remembered accurately, not exaggerated. They protect the ministry from unnecessary risks, and they make sure that if care ever needs to be handed off, it's a seamless process. But, they also discipline us, the counselors, to remember what was actually said and done.
All right, let's jump into our first section, walking the ethical tightrope. Because we have to face it, these notes we take are high stakes. They carry a ton of weight and a whole lot of responsibility. One of the biggest traps we can fall into is what you might call role confusion. Just ask yourself, do your notes sound like they were written by a licensed clinical professional, or do they accurately describe what's happening, which is the ministry of biblical counseling? Getting those two things confused, well, that can create some really serious ethical and even legal problems down the road.
And this is where the rubber really meets the road. It's about our language. Instead of using words like therapy, we should be using biblical counseling. Instead of saying someone was diagnosed with, we write, reported a prior diagnosis. This isn't just playing with words, you guys. It's about being incredibly truthful and precise about the service we're actually providing.
This is such a powerful way to think about it. Imagine every time you write a note, you have three readers looking over your shoulder. First, the Lord. Does this note honor him with its truth and mercy? Second, your supervisor. Does it show that you're doing competent, accountable work? And third, a potential court. Does it sound truthful, restrained, and relevant? If you can say yes to all three, you're on the right track.
Okay, so we've talked about the ethical challenge. So what's the practical solution? How do we actually do this well? Let's move into section 2 and look at a framework that can bring some real discipline order to our notes.
The main tool we're going to use for this is the SOAP note. Now, you might have heard of this before. It's a simple, super common framework that organizes a session into 4 clear parts. And its real genius is how it brings structure to conversations that can often feel chaotic. It really disciplines our memory and our focus.
So let's break down what those 4 letters actually mean. S is for subjective. That's what the counselee says, their story, their perspective. O is for objective. That's what you, the counselor, see and do, their demeanor, your specific actions. A is for assessment. This is your biblically informed pastoral understanding of what's going on. And finally, P is for plan, which is simply what happens next.
This template really spells it out, doesn't it? Look a little closer at what goes into each box. You've got direct quotes in the subjective part, your specific actions in the objective part, even a risk summary in the assessment, and concrete homework in the plan. It's a really practical guide to keep you on track.
All right, theory is one thing, but seeing it in action is another. So let's look at a sample note to make this all super clear and concrete. So check this out. In the S section, the subjective part, you have what the counselee actually reported, a conflict. Then look at O, the objective part. These are observable facts. He was tearful, and the counselor took specific actions. The assessment gives a pastoral insight, and the plan, it's a concrete, actionable assignment. See how clean and organized that is? No fluff, just the essentials.
Okay, so you've written a fantastic, clear, faithful note. Great. But that's only half the battle, right? Let's move on to section 3 and talk about protecting these sacred records, the whole process, from writing the note to handling the file. I mean, think about it. A beautifully written note can do real harm if it's left on a printer, or stored in an unsecure folder, or casually emailed. It becomes totally worthless. And that's why the absolute foundation of protecting this information is a clear written policy that everybody in the ministry understands and follows. No exceptions. And in today's digital world, this is absolutely crucial. The rules for digital files have to be rock solid. For example, cloud accounts have to be owned by the ministry, not an individual counselor. Files should never ever be stored on personal laptops or phones.
Storage has to be secure with access tightly controlled. These are total non-negotiables for protecting confidentiality. This right here, this is some really solid language you could use as a starting point for your own ministry's policy. It sets the default, confidentiality, but it also clearly outlines the very specific, legally required exceptions. Having this in writing brings so much clarity for both the counselor and the person they're counseling.
So the last piece of this puzzle is, how long do you keep these records? And the answer might surprise you. The standard is pretty clear. Most of these ministerial records should be kept permanently, in perpetuity. That just underscores the long-term gravity and significance of the stewardship we've been talking about.
All right, let's start to wrap this up in our final section. It's time to bring it all back to the heart of the matter, to remember the why behind all these practices and policies.
Think of this as your final pre-flight checklist before you save a note. Just run through these questions real quick. Did I get the service right? Did I separate subjective from objective? Did I document any safety concerns? Is the plan concrete? And does it pass that 3-audience test? It's just a simple way to make sure you've covered all the critical bases we've talked about.
And we're going to end here. Because this right here, this is the goal. More than any template, more than any policy, this is the spirit that should animate every single record you create. At the end of the day, a note isn't just a file, it's a testimony. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, what is our documentation testifying about our ministry?